Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Hearthstone. It's ASCII here for Nerf TV, revisiting our Spell Power Mage deck. Now, we looked at this one previously, and that deck was a lot more low cost to actually get the cards. It's a very good introductory deck to get used to the game, but as you play longer, you're going to unlock more cards, and you're going to want to know where to go with those cards. So this is our slightly more advanced Spell Power Mage deck. It's still quite simple to play, it's quite intuitive, but it's got a bit more control in there. It's got some ways to use cards in different systems, and some really great synergies as well. So we'll start going through it. You can see by the mana curve we have a bit of a drop on turn 3. That's because we have a lot of 2-cost cards, because a lot of spells are 2-cost. And you can see we've got a nice boost there at the 7+ as well, because this deck's really going to kick in sort of in that later game. You're going to do some serious damage from about turn 8 onwards, and it gets very, very strong at that point. But first of all, let's start with Arcane Missiles. This deals 3 damage randomly split among enemy characters. So it's basically a piece of RNG that can either work fantastically well or go very badly. Obviously, it's not going to actually hurt you, so it's not as bad as the Mad Bomber, but you could hit someone hero rather than the minions on the field. Now, obviously, it could work out fantastically well and you clear their entire board. There's different ways it can go, but it's a pretty solid card, and it's quite cheap to play out as well. So you can have that as a turn 1 play, or wait later on to clear something, and just fills in quite nicely. Say you've got turn 3, you've played out something like this, because we haven't got a lot of free cost cards, as you can see. So you've played out the Fairy Dragon, you still got 1 mana to use up, you can pop the Arcane Missiles. Now, Mana Worm also synergizes fantastically well with the Arcane Missiles. So if you're going second, you can play out the Mana Worm, which every time you cast a spell gains 1 attack. So you play out the card, you play the coin, that counts as a spell, so now you're at 2-3. Then you play Arcane Missiles, you deal 3 damage to the enemy minions and their hero, and it gives you a very strong card on the field, and it also dealt some damage to the enemy, so that works really, really well. Now, the Mana Worm will also synergise with a couple of these later cards. We've got Arcane Explosion and Frostbolt. Arcane Explosion deals 1 damage to all enemy minions. Not a great card. This is something I've thought about changing up a few times. I haven't found it to be particularly useful, but there are certain times when you're playing someone who's playing a lot of low-cost minions. A lot of rogue decks do that kind of thing. Murloc Rushdown decks, that sort of thing. The Arcane Explosion can clear that quite effectively, and they're the kind of decks you can have a problem with this kind of deck, because this deck wants to play into the later game. And if you're playing something who's trying to rush you down, you need to counter that. So that's why the Arcane Explosion's in there, as it gives you a good way to counter that. Combined with the Arcane Missiles and Frostbolt and stuff like that, it works really well. Now, Frostbolt deals 3 damage to the enemy character and freezes it, so even if you don't kill it, they can't do anything with that minion the next turn. Also, 3 damage for 2 costs is already great value before you even get into the freeze. That's a really good card. Great early game, because you can combine it with the Mana Worm to get some extra boosting of their attack, and it's great in the late game as well, because you can combine it with something like the Pyroblast once you're into the 10 mana points period. Then you can actually Pyroblast the enemy hero while also freezing one of their minions on the field. Next up, the Fairy Dragon can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Now, I've discussed these sort of 2-cost creatures before, and I pointed out that often the 2/3s are actually a lot better than the 3/2s. For example, we've got the Bloodfen Raptor here, which is a 3/2, but that's quite easy to clear off the board and get rid of. Whereas if we look at, if we can find it, the River Crocodilus here, which is a 2/3. Now, dealing 3 damage on turn 2 isn't that easy. Even on turn 3, it's still quite a challenge to actually kill that creature. They often have to sack 2 creatures in to get it. Whereas with the Raptor, you just got to deal 1. Now, the Fairy Dragon obviously seems to fall into the same bill. However, because it can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, it's a lot more difficult to remove. I've seen a lot of players actually just try to get rid of it. You see them pull the card out, they try to cast on it, and it doesn't work. That's why the Fairy Dragon is great. It gives you a minion that's a little bit more difficult to remove, but still got good damage. So they're going to have to trade a minion on the field for it, and you're often going to find them trading out 4 or 5 cost minions to actually get rid of this Fairy Dragon, because it can't be targeted with other stuff. So it's even good slightly later on in the game as well. Now, the Kobold Geomancer, spell damage +1. So this card is sort of hit and miss. Its health is low, its damage is low, and it's giving the extra spell power. The extra spell power is great. I mean, that works really, really great with many different parts of this deck. But because it's so weak, it's easily removed, and that can be a problem. Now, often you're going to find you're actually playing this later on in the game, because you get the spell power boost to use on some of your more powerful spells later on, and it's going to die very quickly and very easily, and that can be a problem. So if you did want to change that for something else, you could. There are options. You could put another Archmage into the deck, for example. There's a few different things you could do to mix it up if you wanted to change that out. But you do then leave yourself a bit short on early game minions. You're leaving yourself with just the Mana Worm and the Fairy Dragon for your, well, all the way up until turn 4. You don't have any other minions then. So you need something in there really, and that's what I decided to go with, because it has that synergy into the later game as well. Now, Arcane Intellect draws 2 cards. This is basically in here to count as a spell for boosting up the Mana Worm, and also working great here with our legendary card. And you're also getting the card draw out of it. By itself, it's not that great. 3 mana cost and a card to draw 2 cards, so you're basically getting 1 card extra for 3 mana, which isn't that great of a trade, really. But if you can synergize it up with something else, then it does work well. Cone of Cold, this is definitely a new addition. It freezes a minion and the minions next to it and deals 1 damage to them all. So basically you can hit up to 3 minions with this in a certain conal area on the board, and that allows you to get some good CC, so you can stop them from doing something on the next turn. You can buy yourself a turn essentially. You've got enough removal in this deck to actually mean they're unlikely to ever have more than 3 minions on the field very often, and the Cone of Cold can quickly deal with that. Fireball deals 6 damage, so obviously this is going to buff up with our increased spell power creatures, and that's solid damage. 4 costs for 6 damage, that's pretty good. It's great for removing creatures off the field or dealing damage to the enemy hero. Next up, we've got Polymorph. This transforms the enemy minion into a 1/1 sheep. Basically a solid piece of removal. It will also go through divine shields and that kind of thing, and then you can just ping it off with your fireball spell to get rid of it. Sorry, not the fireball, the fire blast, there it is, to deal 1 damage. So you can get rid of something there for 6 cost and completely remove it from the board, no matter how powerful the creature is. So that's why Polymorph is quite useful. The downside is it obviously does leave a creature on the field, so if you can kill it directly with fireball, that's generally a better option. But if you're looking at something that's some sort of legendary card or something with a divine shield, like I mentioned, Polymorph is probably the way to go. Another spell power card here, the Ogre Magi, a lot harder to kill now. We're at a 4/4 for 4 costs. That's a lot better value, really. I know it doesn't seem it because obviously you're looking at the same sort of point scoring, but at 2 mana area, 2 HP is very easy to get rid of. At the 4 mana area, 4 HP is a little bit more difficult. I mean, it's doable, there's plenty of cards that will do it, but there are less options at that sort of point in the game, and they give them less choice to what they can actually do, and it plays better later on in the game as well. Next up, the Water Elemental. This freezes any character damaged by this minion, so this is one you could change out if you wanted to, but it's nice to have a bit of CC in here. You're not really too worried about the damage, you're more worried about the actual HP of the creature. So what you can utilise here really is turning into a taunt and that kind of thing. That's going to cause problems for the enemy because they're going to have to attack into you and freeze their creatures, and you can use it quite effectively just to hit the enemy hero to freeze them and that kind of stuff. There's a variety of options you have with this Water Elemental. Again, it's something you could swap out if you prefer something else in the deck. The Azure Drake, spell power +1 and a battle cry. So this is basically the same as the Ogre Magi, apart from you're getting the battle cry of drawing a card, and that is quite useful. It's something that is a little bit lacking in this deck is card draw. Now with the Arcane Intellect and the Azure Drake, you've got plenty, so it should be fine. Archmage in here, so if you were going to change out the Water Elemental or the Kobold Geomancers, Archmage is probably the way to go. It's a pretty hard card to remove from the field. 7 HP is quite a challenge, and 4 damage isn't too bad either, and you're getting that extra spell power. Flame Strike deals 4 damage to all enemy minions, a good solid AoE. Again, this is another card you could go for 2 for in your deck if you wanted to. The Flame Strike is great at sort of clearing a board. I find normally you're not going to ever need more than 1. With your added spell power, you hopefully get this up to 5 damage, and then you can combine it even with the Arcane Explosion and stuff like that to get some really solid board clear. I don't find you're normally going to need more than 1 in a game. It's very few occasions that's actually come up as an issue. Now our legendary card, of course if you don't have it you can't play it, but if you are lucky enough to unlock this one, it works really well. Whenever you cast a spell, it puts a fireball into your hand, so we're going to get lots and lots of these fireballs to deal 6 damage, and obviously we've got these low cost spells that we can be casting out to use that. So if you could, for example, get to turn 7, you play the Archmage, you play the coin, you're going to get a fireball, you play an Arcane Missile, you're going to get another fireball, and it works really, really well. I mean, it's a really powerful card. You're going to get a lot of ammunition in your hand that way, and then on your next turn you can hit him for 12 damage, and then when you've cast that 12 damage you're also going to get 2 more fireballs back in your hand because of that. So that's 12 damage on the turn after you've played him, plus obviously the 5 damage he can deal. That's pretty strong. I mean, it's pretty hard to quibble at that. You also got obviously quite good options as well, because you're actually getting the fireballs rather than a pyroblast. You can actually hit 2 creatures, so you could for example, remove a taunt and then hit the fireball onto the enemy hero and that kind of thing. So it gives you some pretty good options and pretty good leeway of what you can do with the card. And lastly, 2 Pyroblasts, one of the most powerful cards in the game. It's just so strong. As you're getting towards that late game, you can basically only have to get them to 20 HP before you can kill them. That's the good way. That's basically the way you're going to look at it. If you get to turn 8 and they're on 10 HP or less, you've got them. That's it. The game over. Pyroblast is going to ignore anything they've got in the field, any taunts, anything like that is going to go over. It's a fantastically powerful card. So as you can see, it's a pretty strong deck all in all. Got some real powerful damage skills coming in from Pyroblast and Fireball. We've got a good way to get more of those with the Archmage. We've got some good board clear there and there. We've got a very powerful combinations involving the Malworm in the early game, and then the late game involving the Archmage. You're great and you're solid, got some solid gameplay throughout the match, and it works really, really well. Obviously, I did mention we have a sort of a lack of minions in the particularly early game, but you've got enough ball clear not to worry about it. The Fairy Dragon's quite hard to remove. The Malworm buffs up very quickly. The Kobold's a bit meh. I mean, it's not great, but it works okay. And normally you're going to be getting out. You have the Fairy Dragon still on the field by the time you get an Ogre Magi out, or the Azure Drake. So it does work really well. You're going to have enough board control, you're going to have enough ways to clear their board to keep in control of the game. Now, there are some people who play this in a slightly different way. They remove this Archmage and they have the Sylvanas Windrunner in there instead. Now, Sylvanas is a very strong card. I mean, it's incredibly popular with some of the top players at the moment. If I can just find it here and then we can show you. There we are. Take control of an enemy minion as a death rattle. So basically it's a 5/5 for 5 cost, so it's a fairly strong minion to get out in the field anyway, but then when they actually manage to kill it, you're going to steal one of their creatures across. So I mean, it's a lose-lose situation for them. They're going to lose a creature by killing this creature, and turn 5 they're probably going to have to sack a couple minions into it, or at least use a powerful spell or something like that to get this off the board. So it does work really, really well. But that is basically the only real change I would really recommend. There's not much else that is worth doing. You can check out our previous guide, and that was a slightly cheaper version of this deck. Maybe you can go somewhere in between the two. That was where we sort of had some more basic cards. The Pyroblast, I mean, is just the piece de resistance in this deck. It is so strong. It's such an incredibly strong card. 8 mana cost is quite steep, but that 10 damage makes it so you've only got to get the enemies to 20 HP and you've got to win. I mean, that's a third off of the game time. It's very, very strong, and if you've got 2 of them, you can do some serious damage very quickly. So I hope you've enjoyed this guide. Let us know what you think of it, and let us know if you try it out and how it goes for you. I've been Aski and you've been watching Nerf TV. Thank you for watching.